you.
Andrew.
Sure. Thank you, Senators, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to address you on these matters. As the committee would be aware, the AMW made a brief submission and in part we supported the submission of our colleagues in AFTINET, the Australian Fair Trade and Investment Network, of which the AMW is one of a number of members. We also would seek to bring to the committee's attention a number of issues which we believe are of importance. We certainly endorse the submission by the ACTU and endorse the words just spoken by President Jed Carney. But we'd also bring to your attention what we believe are crucial matters which need to be addressed by this Parliament were there to be, or if there is to be, an appropriate response to what we now see as almost an avalanche of free trade agreements which seem to be being brought forward by this government. Can I amplify the comments of Jed Carney with respect to the consultation? Minister Robb seems to be at pains to point out that the ACTU seems to have some special relationship with this government with respect to the negotiation of free trade agreements, which I must say I find a little intriguing. The only discussions that we've had with this government through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade are those meetings which are stakeholder engagement, supposedly. The last meeting took place on the 5th of March of this year. At that, there were more than 20 items for discussion with respect to the presentation to the stakeholders, and for the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement report, that aspect took approximately 10 minutes of the entire 2 hours that were there. The questions were asked, and we were told that they were prepared to have discussions, but at some indeterminate time in the future, but otherwise the information that we sought wasn't available. That's the sum total of the discussion that's been had with representatives of the ACTU, to my knowledge, this calendar year, and can I say that has been the standard since September 2013. We decry the absence of transparency with respect to trade agreements in general, but especially with respect to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. We believe that is a signal deficit on the part of this government, but also the way in which the department now operates. The former Minister for Trade was at pains to consult with stakeholders, including trade unions, about matters pertinent to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. At that time, for that period, we certainly had many discussions with both representatives of the department and also Minister Emerson on trade. Unfortunately, we can't say that has taken place at all since September of 2013, and despite my involvement in trade issues, I think Senator Ludwig could attest for possibly the last 10 or so years, I am yet to meet Minister Robb, nor has he made himself available to requests from my union or to my knowledge, from other unions. The other issues that we'd like to address you on really deal with the process of approval and endorsement of this agreement and indeed other agreements. The problem that occurs is that, in our view, and we've submitted this on a number of occasions, that treaties were formerly instruments by which nation-states avoided going to war with each other or resolved matters of conflict between them. What we now have, however, with the treaties that are being negotiated and endorsed, is of course a process of any number of issues which really are the sovereign responsibility of the Parliament, being the subject of treaties with foreign governments which then somehow preclude the democratic process from having any oversight or involvement. For the AMW, and it would be, I think, the view of most, if not all, trade unions, this democratic deficit is something which we believe is a signal failure on the part of successive governments, we might add, in that things which should be, and matters which should be the subject of legislation and also consultation can be, if you like, whisked away by virtue of a treaty being negotiated. The fact that there there is very little oversight and very little public consultation about these things indicates to us that there is an absence of real concern for the democratic process. And that democratic deficit is something that we find quite distasteful and something which should be rectified by way of this Parliament having much stronger oversight and also other matters. We also say that the national interest is not served by matters such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. We note the comments, for instance, of the Treasurer, where he said, and unfortunately I don't have a date for this quotation, but in our submission what we say is that he says, there would not have been any free trade agreements if we hadn't made the hard decisions about industry assistance. So what the Treasurer is telling the public at large, but most especially those workers who have lost their jobs, for instance, in the automotive industry, and the thousands of which are going to lose their jobs in the automotive industry, that it was more important to reach an agreement with respect to trade with Japan and China than it was to actually actively support their jobs in the industries in which they work. We also say that the impact of these agreements, so-called free trade agreements, are such that they are not dealt with in a way that we believe really bear scrutiny. Studies, and we put in our submission, studies indicate to us that the impact of the Australia-US free trade agreement, notwithstanding the large fanfare that accompanied its signature and ratification, in fact has resulted in very little advantage to Australia. And in fact, there are suggestions from some studies that agreement, in fact, by way of its bilateral nature, has prevented trade opportunities opening up with other countries. And we say that that should also be investigated. Likewise, we also say that the current scandal, we believe, and the AWMU has been very strongly on the record talking about the scandal of the procurement of our new submarines, is something that appears to also be linked to the urgency of concluding a free trade agreement with Japan. And I think that the senators would be aware of the media reports yesterday with respect to the procurement of those submarines as being somehow something which there was a desire to remove our capacity to make and maintain those submarines in Australia on the basis that it would be better, in part, for us to have a free trade agreement. We say that those matters need to be dealt with, and we say that parliamentary scrutiny of that, and also some very deep insights need to be derived from research before we go down this path. Finally, what we'd say is that investor-state dispute settlement, which my colleague Geraldine Carney has spoken about, is something that really obviates our capacity as a nation-state to regulate our own entitlements. After all, as I think studies have shown, and we rely very much on the work of Laurie Wallach, who is an American lawyer and activist for the organisation called Public Citizen, who has done studies of investor-state dispute settlement. ISDS is effectively a world unto itself, where, in short, you have a number of law firms which specialise in ISDS. Those law firms can appear one day for a plaintiff, one day for a respondent, and another day as an arbitrator/mediator. We say that is an abrogation of our sovereign right as a country. But worse, it appears that it has become a quote-unquote nice little earner for those companies, and which we say is not assimilable to what should be our democratic processes in Australia. We have important public goods which should not be the subject of being able to be written away or wished away, if you like, by private arbitration, which is set up at the behest of large corporations seeking to take advantage over the Australian government. Senators, we believe that this committee has an important role to play. We're very happy to answer questions and look forward to your report. Thank you.